Route 616, your home for all things Marvel main continuity. Hello everybody, this is Ryan, otherwise known as RJ or RJ Epic One here, and today I am here with my guest Bill, who I will let speak in a moment, but we are here to start a new podcast about the main continuity of Marvel Comics, which is why we're called Route 616. So my guest, my co-host actually, Bill is my co-host, so I'm gonna pass it off to him, off to them, so they can introduce themselves.
Well, I'm Bill. I'm probably partially responsible for this because I came up with the insanity of trying to read all of Marvel a couple of years ago, and RJ got jealous of it.
Bill is the main reason this is in existence. So Bill, what was it, 5 years ago you started this insanity technically? And then
something like that. That's the one window I don't have open.
Either way, Bill
See
had...
how long ago it was that I started this shit.
Bill started reading the Complete Marvel... It's a site that's called Complete Marvel Reading Order. There is different orders, and that is what we are following for this podcast. We are starting with Fantastic Four issue number 1 and going from August 1961 and going all the way. Well, I mean, we'll see if this podcast lasts, but hypothetically, one day we would catch up to the present, but we'll see if that ever happens.
That ain't happening.
No, that will maybe if we're around in 10 years or something, maybe we'll see. But yeah, the whole point is to go back from Fantastic Four number 1 and explore the Marvel main continuity in full. And today we are tackling 7 different comics or stories. Sometimes it's only one story inside of a comic, and for the first couple episodes it's 7 per episode, but it might change. We're kind of playing around with the format as we go along. We also
I think once we hit the full-length stories for everything, it's going to be substantially less per episode.
Yeah, when we get the full 22, 23 page stories and everything more constantly, it will probably be maybe 5 per episode tops or something. We'll see though. It all depends how much time we talk about these things and what issues come up.
Yes. And just an aside to anyone trying to do this with us, keep in mind that quality has no bearing on the inclusion into this. Some of these are real bad. There's
quite a bit that are real bad, really. Even if they're not bad, there's a lot of really boring ones. A lot of it's just the creative teams, and a lot of it is just kind of the different types of storytelling in different time periods too. It just might not stick up. It might not go well with aging.
Yeah. Well, I have the advantage on RJ in this that I've already read up to 75 once, and I'm restarting with the podcast because talking about comics I read 4 years ago is challenging. So, fortunately, I know that the boring stretch doesn't last that long. That's mostly when they're still hanging on to the tropes of the Golden Age, and once they really figure out an ongoing narrative that goes away.
That is very true. And since you mentioned the Golden Age, Fantastic Four number 1, a lot of people do kind of consider the launch of the Silver Age, but it kind of is in a way. It also is very much, we're still stuck in the Golden Age with a lot of these early titles and everything.
Yeah, the short ones we're going to have mixed in here are 100% holdovers from Golden Age comics, where they're just single stories in the Golden Age sci-fi anthology books that happen to have some feature that is either called back to in later comics or just references something that's canon to 616, and so they get lumped in, but they're not what modern comic readers expect from a comic story at all.
Yeah. Exactly. And before we get into the topics of today with the different comics we're going to be tackling, I do want to say apologies for any like um any audio issues there might be in these early episodes. We're just working with what we got right now. So audio will probably change throughout the episodes depending on how long we do this, Finn. So stick with us if you enjoy the topics that we're talking about. I suppose we'll go into we'll talk about the stories we'll be talking about today. In today's episode, we will be covering Fantastic Four issues number 1 through 4. On top of that, we have Tales to Astonish issue number 27, story A, and issues 29 and 30, the A stories and those as well.
Actually, one thing, 30 is the E story.
Oh, 30 is the E story. Well, I stand corrected, and that's okay. That's why Bill's here.
Trust me, the A story is far better, but not canon.
Well, there we go. That's the Finn with this reading order too. Is that in these old series like Astonish, Suspense, and all those ones, there's not every story from the issue is canon. Only certain ones are. So that's why we will specify which story we are talking about. So I guess Fantastic Four number 1 is where we're starting, and we decided with the format, and we are gonna give a summary of the issue first before we launch into giving our comments about the issue and making our jokes and blah blah blah, and we'll talk about the impact of Fantastic Four number 1, of course, because we kind of have to when talking about this comic. But I'll let you, Bill, have the honors of starting the summary of Fantastic Four 1, I think, if you're down for that.
All right. This is Fantastic Four, issue number 1, The Fantastic Four. Written by Stan Lee, art by Jack Kirby, inked by George Klein, and colored by Stan Goldberg, although we're using the Marvel Unlimited version that's been digitally recolored, so we won't have any thoughts on that. And lettered by Artie Simic. And this story begins. We have the various members of the Well, it opens with Reed Richards firing the Fantastic Flare out the window, and we have the individual members of the Fantastic Four going about their daily lives when they see the flare, and they all rush back to headquarters. And this is just basically an excuse to show off everyone's powers from the beginning. So they rush back to the Fantastic Four headquarters to learn that nuclear bases have been disappearing around, and nuclear power plants have been disappearing around the globe. And at that point, we get a flashback to how they gained their powers, which, if you're familiar at all with Fantastic Four, is pretty much the same origin story they're still using up to this day, where they all go on a rocket to explore something. In this one, they're actually going to study the cosmic rays that cause their transformation. Except the effect is a little more potent than they expected, and they'll get effectively incapacitated by the cosmic rays and end up crashing the rocket back on the planet, at which point they learn that they've all developed superpowers. Reed Richards can stretch his body into just about any length or shape. They slowly refine that to a little more balanced power set, but right now it's whatever Stan and Jack come up with. Sue Storm can turn invisible. Her younger brother, Johnny Storm, can catch on fire. And Ben Grimm turns into a giant pile of orange rocks. And because this is early Fantastic Four, and Ben is in peak asshole form at this point, he immediately tries to kill Reed over this. But they get them calmed down. They decide they're going to go and be superheroes, so they give themselves code names. Reed calls himself Mr. Fantastic because he's not humble at all. Sue calls himself the Invisible Girl because it's 1962 and misogyny is a thing.
Very much so.
Johnny calls himself the Human Torch, and Ben calls himself the Thing. And at that, we flash back to the present to learn that they've triangulated where all the nuclear plants are disappearing from, and right in the middle is the not suspiciously at all named Monster Island. And so they set out for Monster Island, but along the way, we get an aside of a nuclear plant in Algeria, I believe it is. Although it might have just been Africa originally, because early 60s, Africa was just a country at times. At least according to writers. Where the nuclear plant falls into the ground and then a giant monster comes out and attacks it, and it's revealed to have been controlled by a guy called the Mole Man. But that's all we see from that. So the Fantastic Four zip off to Monster Island, where they immediately get attacked by a strange-looking monster and get to show us some of their superpowers again, defending it. And they go down into the hole it came out of and find a trapdoor in the side, which they open up and get knocked out immediately. And wake up in a giant room full of diamonds with the Mole Man. At which point, he gives them a summary of how he got his powers. And he was so hideous that basically no one wanted to have anything to do with him. So he left on his own to go and just find a place where he could be ugly by himself and no one would bother him. And eventually he arrived on Monster Island and crawled down to the underground, where he got himself trapped, and his eyes ended up losing a lot of their functionality just because of living in the darkness. And he's decided that he's going to be the ruler of the creatures that live in the underworld and eventually take over the world. As we've mentioned, this is very Golden Age, so his motivations don't actually have to make much sense. And at this point, he decides to show off a bit. But oh, what a surprise, Ben Grimm shows up and threatens him, so he summons a giant monster from the previously unnoticed panel in the middle of the ground. Human Torch starts flying her at the monster, at which point basically everyone reveals that they could just easily escape from the suits that the Mole Man had shoved them in. But the Mole Man summons a giant horde of monsters, so they heroically flee and get in their plane and leave Monster Island, at which point it caves in and then explodes behind them for reasons. And that is the end of the story.
Yes, and pretty much the Mole Man is presumed. I mean, he could be dead, he might not be, but
it's drawn as a mushroom cloud, so at this point he was probably intended to be dead until they decided recurring villains could be cool.
And the advantage that Fantastic Four actually has pretty early on is they actually do recur in films, which is really good, because Fantastic Four has the advantage some titles don't have actually having pretty iconic villains early on. And in fact, starting with Mole Man, a lot of people would look back and question starting with Mole Man as your first film, but they actually do a pretty good job with him here, really. He's done quite well.
Mole Man, unfortunately, actually is one of the iconic villains of the early years, because I'm one of those people that does not like Mole Man.
Yeah, I mean, even from the start, it's almost brought in the question in terms of the Mole Man character, whether how bad is he? How bad is Mole Man truly, or did society kind of form him into it with their standards and everything? It's even almost it's kind of here from the start with that when Mole Man is monologuing a little bit, but
Yeah. They definitely played around with the idea of making him a sympathetic villain before they went full Golden Age and he decided to conquer the world. They were showing hints of nuance that other comics at the time weren't doing.
That's very true. It's kind of I like how this issue we have. It's like the first half is kind of just we're getting there, we're introducing everybody. It's very classic comic book when you like we get our origin story here in the first half of the issue, and then the second half we go right into our first villain with Mole Man, and Mole Man actually doesn't appear next for a while. He doesn't appear until Fantastic Four number 22, so unlike a lot of villains early on, he does have a little bit of a break. You touched on their powers earlier and stuff. I do have to throw in that on top of igniting himself into a flame, Johnny Storm can manipulate fire in general, so that's also something.
I omitted that part because it gets dropped fairly quickly, and it's bad when they do it.
Yeah. It is.
I was trying to go for more of the canonical powers they have rather than...
They do not touch on it at all.
Golden Age, we don't know how this works yet. Style writing.
Johnny pretty much in this issue, I'm pretty sure for the most part, is just like flying around on fire, and that's like it. So
yeah, they even dabbled in this one with his ability to fly while on fire having a limited time frame, because in the beginning when everyone's showing off their powers on the way to their headquarters to find out about the Mole Man, he runs out of gas in midair and falls, and Reed has to stretch out to catch him because they couldn't come up with a better way for Reed to demonstrate his powers.
The thing with a lot of comic characters as you go, as we make our way through the timeline, there is a lot of changes into different characters' power sets, and there's the Fantastic Four actually see a decent amount of it through the years, especially probably Human Torch has the biggest differences as time goes along.
And Sue. Sue definitely gets a lot because starting out, she's useless. She can turn invisible. That's it. That's all she can do. Yeah, but over time, they start giving her invisible force fields and the ability to turn other things invisible, and actually giving her some powers that are useful in a comic environment where no one wants to read about an invisible person sneaking around.
Yeah, Sue has the biggest changes probably in general because she, like you said, actually becomes useful, and actually she literally can only turn invisible at this point, and that's how it lasts for quite a while. So it'll be interesting.
I think it's around issue 30 they start playing with the force fields, because they got called out enough on the fans that in issue 11 they had to write an actual in-universe defense of why she's not completely useless, because they were getting so many letters like, why is Sue even here? She can't do anything.
Yeah, there's literally a story that they address questions from the fan. It is the most meta fan. I've read a lot of Deadpool comics, and this gives a Deadpool a run for its money with how meta it is, especially for the time. And I cannot wait for us to talk about that issue because it's a very fun issue. But we won't spoil why we're excited or not excited to talk about it issue now. In terms of We've talked about the characters quite a bit now. I guess the only other thing in terms of characters I want to touch on, his name is not dropped now, but the big main monster we see on the cover and in the issue a lot will be called Giganto. He's the most known one of Mole Man's crew. He's the one that kind of turns on Mole Man, and so he's pretty much the only relevant one that I'm giving acknowledgement to. We touched on the creative team. We all, of course, the classic Stan Lee Jack Kirby combination. And I guess we should just talk about the impact of Fantastic Four #1 now before we give our personal thoughts on on like our rating of the issue and everything and blah blah blah. So of course fantastic we already mentioned earlier Fantastic Four #1 from a lot of people is considered the dawn of the Silver Age. And really um this is definitely one of the most important issues, objectively the most important issue, almost you could say, in Marvel history, because this is, of course, this is when Stan Lee like kind of put his foot down, as the legend goes, and was like wanted to write comics that he wanted to write, and this was kind of him throwing for the editors letting him throw something out there. So
Yeah,
without
it's
the
the first time they've written superhero comics in 7 years.
there we go. So
Um, and those previous superhero comics were absolute failures that lasted about 6 issues each. And those were all relaunches of Golden Age heroes from the 40s that got canceled between 46 and 48. And then they retried them in the Red Scare of the 50s to see if they worked as well fighting communists as they did fighting Nazis. They did not. And
at
so all
all.
the comics got canceled, and Timely and Atlas, as Marvel was previously known, got completely out of superhero comics and were just ceding the field to DC. And then with this was their first foray back into anything superhero related. And it's very clear in this that they're trying to be the anti DC. Like, at this point, the Fantastic Four don't even have uniforms because DC's superheroes wore costumes. So Marvel's trying to distinguish themselves by having them just in street clothes.
Marvel has always it's Marvel has a lot of time been the more grounded universe in terms of superheroes, which is part of the reason I've been partial to them in the past. Though I do love both companies, we both love both companies, but I there is something to be said about Marvel's grounded approach at times to their characters. Um, What else? So, I mean, without the Fantastic Four, we said this is their first foray in superhero comics, and these are the type of comics Stan Lee wanted to write. And without this comic, there's no Marvel universe, and that's just how it is. So,
Without this comic, there's no Marvel. I
yeah,
firmly believe that because, I mean, full disclosure, I'm trying the even more insane version of the read true, where I read basically everything remotely 616 adjacent Marvel's printed, and I've made it to 1955 in that project. And it's not good. They're all very dull, very repetitive, very simplistic, trope filled 6-page stories that they just repeat the same 3 or 4 stories with different outfits dropped on the hero. Because they're so generic, most of the time you can't even tell differences between the heroes. And if they hadn't jumped into superheroes to break that trend, the company wouldn't have lasted.
no, it would have aged out of existence. So, without this comic, there is no Marvel, which means for modern fans, there's no MCU, of course, and just in general, without Fantastic Four, even though Spider-Man is objectively Marvel's biggest character, there's no Spider-Man without this comic.
Yeah, Amazing Fantasy 15 would not have happened if this wasn't moderately successful.
There's no Spider-Man. There's no Thor. I mean, they may have tried Captain America again at some point, but probably not. Iron Man wouldn't have happened. There's just we don't get the X-Men. There's none of it. There's no Marvel universe without this comic.
Yes, the
So
only other hero that might have been tried if this didn't take off would have been the Hulk, because it comes so close after. In fact, next episode you'll be learning why the original Hulk run was a mistake.
yeah, the original. We will be talking about that in the next episode, and we're gonna probably have some fun with that because the Hulk, the 6 issue run of the Hulk is very interesting that they start with, and yeah, the Hulk might have actually happened, like you said, anyway, since it's like so horror adjacent anyway. They probably would have tried it.
Yeah, it was basically just like a sci-fi horror style story in the original run. I believe it came out only like 4 or 5 months after Fantastic Four started, so
Yeah.
they were probably already working on the concept at this point.
Probably were, yes. So with the site we're using, we can also like give reviews and everything. But we as we go along, we have been we can mark the comics as read and everything as well. But the main part of it is we give each issue a rating. And for my rating of this issue, it's a 5-star rating, and I gave it a solid 3 stars, which is right about in the middle, which is pretty. It's like an okay, the good comic, a decent comic. So, what was your rating for this issue?
I also gave it a 3, and I consider 3 to just be like a good comic.
Yeah,
comics are supposed to be good, so like my average rating is on the good side. But I've never been that big of a fan of Fantastic Four outside of Ben, and this comic was wordy, and honestly, I found it kind of boring, so if it wasn't so important, it probably would have gotten a 2.
That's the thing with some of these early issues. There might be some slight advantages some comics receive in terms of their ratings just because of how important they are. Because I was pretty bored with this too. Actually, I was less bored with this than I thought I would be, so I was actually decently surprised to that extent. But yeah, 3 stars for us is like a good comic. This was a good, solid comic. It wasn't great, wasn't fantastic. 5 stars is like a pretty great comic, pretty. In some cases, that we might say close to perfect. 1 star for me is like I'm pretty much offended in some way reading it. Like it's a waste of time, pretty much. Oh, and I just like was bored to death. 2 is like it wasn't that good, but I wasn't offended reading it. But yeah, so this got
my general. I was bored by it. 1 is this story has problems. Usually, it gets limited in superhero comics to stories where I had trouble figuring out what was going on because it's so poorly constructed, or they just do something unbelievably offensive in it, which absolutely happens in comics.
Yeah, it does.
Although, at least in my case, I tried to avoid penalizing comics for offensive things that are a result of the fact that I'm reading these 70 years after they were printed.
Yeah.
Because social norms have changed a lot from when these were written. And saying it's bad because it doesn't adhere to the standards of 2022 seems unfair.
That is the caveat for these reviews. We are trying to look at these stories for the lenses as if we're as close to we can as if we're here in 1961 and whatever year we're in when we're reading these comics. We're not going to judge them based off social norms in terms of our ratings.
I will be making fun of stuff that has aged poorly, but I didn't penalize the comics into straight rating for it.
Exactly. Speaking of making fun of stuff, I know you have a very important thing to make fun of inside this first issue.
Yes. Someone, possibly Stan Goldberg, possibly the person who recolored this for Marvel Unlimited, decided that the thing's very diaper-adjacent shorts should be colored brown. So every time he's ready to fight, he is walking around in a saggy brown diaper. And it is distractingly hilarious.
Thing is a brown diaper baby confirmed. Oh, I guess we should talk about the creators more in terms of our thoughts on the creators. And I know you especially have thoughts on good old Jack Kirby.
Yes. And this will probably be my most controversial opinion of the entire podcast we run. Because I don't actually think Jack Kirby is that good an artist. He gets a lot of credit for his creativity in helping or in some places straight up inventing the characters that are in most of the early comics that Marvel produced. And he does some innovative stuff in his art. But on a technical level, I think most of his contemporaries are better on like just straight up ability to draw. Like, he struggles with proportions quite a bit in early issues, although he gets better at that as time goes on. And the real big tell is he knows how to draw exactly one woman's face. Every single woman in a Jack Kirby illustrated comic has the same face and just different hair, which can really be noticeable when they've miscolored one of the character's hair. And I know several times in the future they'll have Alicia Masters and Crystal in the same scene. Two characters will meet later, and they'll miscolor one of their hairdos, and you can't tell them apart.
Yeah, that's very true. I have my thoughts on Jack Kirby are slightly nicer. I think there's worse artists than him during the time. I will say, we've talked about this before in our personal chats. I do have a soft spot in my heart for good old Steve Ditko. Although I will say, I kind of have the soft spot in my heart for Steve Ditko and everything. I kind of think that Jack Kirby is a little more consistent than Ditko, but I still kind of enjoy Ditko's work a little more. But I'm also a big Spider-Man guy, as you are as well.
Yeah. I would agree. Kirby is definitely more consistent than Ditko and works better under pressure than Ditko, because Kirby is like penciling 8 comics a month a lot of the time.
Yeah. We'll kind of see, we'll be talking more about the creators too in a few episodes. Some Thor issues they play around with switching some Ant-Man issues too. I think they play around with switching artists around some, so we'll kind of see the differences between Jack Kirby's art and these guest artists they bring in, so that'll be fun.
The supporting titles like Ant-Man and Thor were never as big at the time as a Fantastic Four or Spider-Man. They were, in fact, half-length stories. But they played around with trying to take some of the pressure off of Jack. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, we have Stan Lee, who is one of the most influential people in all of comics. I mean, we probably don't need to tell you who he is. He is the sole writer in Marvel for a while. I think in 2 years or so they'll start bringing in Larry Lieber, his brother, to write some of the B titles, but that's about it. And so Stan has a hand in the creation of basically every early Silver Age character that exists. And he has some issues, but overall I think his work is fairly good for the time. It will become a running joke throughout this podcast, the stuff Stan doesn't understand, such as magnets, or women, or fire, or transistors.
There's a lot.
Overall, he produces fairly consistently entertaining stories, and especially once we get to 1964, 1965, I actually think they're some of the better years I've read.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, without Stan Lee, there's no Marvel. So even if some of his work is very funny to look back on, or even if he doesn't deserve as much credit in certain aspects of certain characters, he's still the man. Stan is the man. He really is. Thank you.
And I think a lot of the stuff we make fun of is a combination of him writing like 12 stories a month and not having the internet. So a lot of the stuff that seems super obvious to us would have back into time required him to take like an entire day off and go to the library and research it as opposed to just putting it into his phone, seeing what the answer is.
Yeah, and who has time?
So
Who has
there
time for a
has to
day at the
be-
library?
Well, when you're writing 12 superhero stories plus whatever he was still doing in the romance and western titles,
Exactly.
not him.
Exactly. He doesn't have time for a day at the library, I'll tell you what. He if he take that day at the library, he's not writing us those Hulk issues, so
That might have been a good thing. He should have researched Fire Den.
oh my. Do we have any more to say about Fantastic Four #1 before we move on to the second issue?
Skimming through what's actually important to mention here. The one thing that is also worth mentioning on this, it's just a little aside on the creative location of Marvel at the time, like where they were mentally with the creativity. Fantastic Four #1 isn't set in New York City like basically everything else Marvel wrote in the early Silver Age. It was set in Central City because they were trying the DC fictitious city angle and only dropped it. I'm not sure if they say where they're located in issue 2 or 3, but fairly quickly they just say screw it, it's New York City and go that way. But it definitely started with them intending to have it a little less grounded in reality.
Yeah, they don't commit right away, so that is a good note. Well, I suppose if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the second issue. If there's something else, so feel free to stop me.
I think where we had so much important stuff to cover with this one, little nitpicks of things that happen in the art or so probably aren't necessary, so I'd say we can move on.
Yeah, I mean,
I had some random panels that I wanted to call attention to, like odd things that happened in them or so, but we just talked a fair bit about just getting the comic covered, so in the interest of time, I think we'll probably skip that.
oh, I will say real quick though, we talked about how Reed wasn't humble, and called himself Mr. Fantastic, of course, and he would go on for the next 60 years to he would go flip back and forth between being a dick and actually being a good human. So it'll be fun to see Reed Richards ride.
Because I'm at 75 and it's pretty much constant dick the whole way.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of flips and then he goes right back. So you could argue if it's even a flip, it's kind of like a quick turn right back. So I mean, we'll talk more about Reed Richards as a character as time goes along.
Yes, that was kind of a constant in early Marvel team books too. That the quote team leader always seems to be a complete asshole because once again looking ahead a bit. But Professor and Xavier and Scott Summers in X-Men are also massive dicks.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, that does seem to be a thing that happens. The team leaders always being dicks. So we will probably be discussing that a lot more as we go down the line. Okay, I guess it's time for Fantastic Four #2. Summary of this. I really don't remember this issue. I'm literally flipping through it as we talk. What is going on here? Oh yeah, we start off.
Are you trying to describe a Skrull issue by memory? Because have fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, we start off with the thing in some water, and they literally open up with, what is happening here? It's like, I don't know, you tell me. He is basically what's going on in this issue is we have the debut of the Skrulls, who are somehow the biggest part of this issue and also very unimportant all at once. And they do not feel like a big deal here, at least to me. but I also know how big a deal the scrolls become, so it's kind of hard to put myself in that mind frame. And
They were not written to be a big deal.
no,
This is just your stock second issue of an early 60s superhero title fighting alien story.
what rating did you give this? Because looking back, I was very surprised that I gave this 3 stars, because I do not remember why I gave this 3 stars.
I gave it 3 stars because it was actually decently entertaining. Like, as far as the generic alien invasion story that Stan likes to tell, it was better told. If you want, I can do the actual summary because I read it like 3 days ago.
Yeah, I might pass it off to you. It's surprisingly an entertaining issue despite being relatively unimportant.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what happens. We have the Skrulls are just imitating the Fantastic Four for this issue and setting them up to look like they are committing these big crimes and turning the government and just regular civilians against them. It's mainly what's going on here. But and I'll let you add on to everything else that happens.
That's basically that's the gist of it. The Skrulls impersonate the Fantastic Four and commit a variety of crimes in their name and image, so that society and the government turn against them and sent the army to try to arrest them. But they break out of jail and go and find the Skrulls that impersonated them and reveal them to the military so that they're cleared of all wrongdoing. And then they disguise themselves as the fake Skrulls, or as the Skrulls that pretended to be them, and go to the Skrull mothership and convince them that everyone on Earth is way too powerful and there are tons of scary monsters on Earth, so that the Skrulls couldn't possibly succeed in an invasion, so that the Skrulls fuck off back home. And then they hypnotize the 3 Skrulls that were impersonating them and hadn't escaped back to the ship as into taking the form of cows and remaining as cows for all time, and nothing bad ever comes from that.
Oh man, looking back for this issue, oh, wow. This issue's great.
Yeah, I actually might have underrated it by giving it 3. I enjoyed it far more the second time.
Wow. This story, I'd like to throw out there that the mothership is also disguised as a water tower, which is fantastic.
There was some stuff I had major issues with in the story.
The Thing wearing slacks?
No, that's not
That's
one of
my major issue.
Anything with the Thing was hilarious in this issue. I mean, at one point he picked up a desk and was going to beat people with it.
I'm looking at
in
that
my
panel
single
right now.
favorite panel in the entire comic.
Oh, okay. Anybody listening to this podcast, which I hope we're going to try to garner an audience for this. I hope this takes off. Please read Fantastic Four #2. This has some of that panel is fantastic. This issue's hilarious. Looking back on it,
it's if it wasn't for the problems I'm going to go into, the logic of some of the stuff in the story, and I'm not talking about shape-shifting aliens, which is just comic book zaniness that we expect. But stuff that I think they should have been able to figure out to explain a bit better. Other than that, it's just early 60s fun.
it is. Another important note before you go into all that. This is the already in the second issue, and this is the first time that the Thing has a transformation back to his human form before then tragically going back to being the Thing. So that's fun.
The comic glossed over it, so did I.
It takes like two. It takes
not even
2
a page.
pages.
He turns on the bottom of one and he's back to the Thing by the bottom of the next.
It's fun. So what's the issues you're gonna bring up, I guess?
First of all, the Skrulls had this cunning plan to disguise themselves is Earth's most famous team of heroes, the Fantastic Four, who at this point have had exactly one adventure on a deserted island. So how the hell does anyone not named Mole Man know who they are?
They kind of leave it up to the imagination.
They're just all of a sudden famous for no reason whatsoever.
They've had so many adventures so far. I don't know how we missed them all.
And that's the lesser of the two issues, because I can accept that they did other stuff that wasn't written in the comic books that people know them from. But the one that really set me off was when the Skrulls were describing how they impersonated the Fantastic Four, because Skrulls don't actually have any superpowers other than shape-changing.
At this point.
Yeah. So they had to fake all the superpowers. And the one that played Sue stole this like fist-sized diamond and apparently turned invisible and just walked out with it. But they reveal what actually happened is that the Skrull shrank to a minuscule size and just scampered off and no one could see it because it was so small. Which begs this question, what happened to the diamond? Because Skrulls can only change their own size. Even their clothes is really just part of their body that they've shaped to look like they're wearing an outfit. And all of a sudden, this diamond just vanishes.
The first time the Fantastic Four title would steal the thunder of Ant-Man before he even debuts.
Ant-Man has very little thunder to steal.
I love how I'll touch on that later too. I love how I also loved how the Skrull pulled off the Johnny Storm imitation too. I thought that one was really funny when I read it the first time.
I liked that one.
On the this issue also gives us a bonus of a good old thing. I guess would it be called a pinup? I don't even know, but it gives us a nice thing picture at the back. At the comic, a nice ugly thing here. With him wearing his good old brown diaper. So I appreciate that. Did you? I don't know if your version.
I didn't actually go past the page where it said the end, so I'm just scrolling ahead real quick to look at that. There we go. There's diaper thing, and he kind of looks melted.
Yeah, they give us a picture of Ben Grimm too. His old, he looks like he.
I looked at that panel.
Yeah, fantastic. They give us a Johnny Storm one next issue, and then they give us tips on his powers and issues after that. I guess, do we have anything more to talk about with issue 2? I mean, I guess we didn't touch on that. We said this was the Skrulls' first appearances. They don't appear for a long time.
There's not really anything else to add to them at this point. By the time they show up again, they've been so heavily retconned that they bear very little resemblance to what we see here.
Yeah, of course it's done by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby again. I guess they changed up their anchors here. We got George Klein and Saul Brodsky. Good old Dick Ayers with Jack Kirby on the cover again, so that's nice. Colorist Goldberg again, not that matters to us. And John Duffy's the letterer. I forget if he was for issue 1, but he probably was.
No, it was Simic in issue 1.
Okay.
But
all right, different letterer too.
That's actually a pet peeve of mine that they recolored a lot of these for Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah.
The bold, like, largely mono shaded, just like a single color ink filling the different shapes doesn't look nearly as good as the more detailed original art. It really looks like they just dropped these comics into MS Paint and used the fill tool.
Yeah, it does. Already the actually big difference here between issue 1 and 2 as well. The last time we had editors Ralph Macchio and Marv Wolfman, I guess, with Stan Lee, but this time it's only Stan Lee, and then Archie Goodwin was apparently the editor-in-chief when Fantastic Four 1 came out, but already I guess that's been passed to Stan Lee at this point. So there's a lot of changes going on after the success of Fantastic Four issue number 1, which makes sense.
Yeah, I think Goodwin let Stan have. If I remember correctly, Goodwin let Stan have the superhero division.
Makes sense.
And then just stayed in charge of the romance and westerns and sci-fi.
So already there's been a lot of change at at Marvel, at the newly helmed Marvel, I guess, since this has happened. Um, okay, I guess is that all for Fantastic Four number two?
Yeah, I didn't really have a lot to say about it because it was just a good, fun comic,
We
but there wasn't a lot
we
to it.
actually we spent longer on it than I thought we would actually, so that was kind of nice. But up next is one I'm really excited to talk about, really, and it's issue 27 of Tales to Astonish, and it is the A story as we talk about the man in the anthill. So I guess again, it's probably just easier for me right now to let Bill give us some summaries for a lot of these issues. So we'll just let Bill take it off.
All right, this one we're introduced to scientist Hank Pym, who is at a conference talking. Well, he invented a shrink because they tell it in a confusing manner. He invented a shrinking formula that he used to shrink a chair. Then we flash back to a conference where everyone's making fun of him that his invention will never work and that he should just stick to practical things like building bombs because his crazy invention will never work. And why is he experimenting? What does he think science is for? And so he goes back home and he works for months and develops this shrinking formula that he immediately decides to test on himself. And he shrinks himself down to, one might almost say, ant size, and leaves his house and immediately falls into an anthill where he lands in a pool of honey and gets rescued by an ant. But then the other ants attack him. So he throws a rock at a match he found and lights part of the anthill on fire. And climbs out and judos an ant off a cliff that was attacking him. And then he's trying to get back into his house, but he can't get up to the window. So luckily the ant that rescued him before has become his friend and lets him ride it up to his window where he gets back into his shrinking formula, which now grows him back to normal size. And because it's so dangerous and unpredictable, he destroys it and swears that he will work on practical problems like bullets for the rest of his career. And it ends, and he does nothing important except he never steps on an anthill again because there is one ant that he doesn't want to kill.
The story.
It's way better than it sounds.
It's so much better than it sounds. I love this. So I only started this project of reading the full Marvel order like a month or so ago. Probably like a month and a half, 2 months at this point. And it's when I was first reading these, because I'm running on memory and also looking at them right now as we're talking about them. This was my favorite story so far up to this point. I liked this more than the Fantastic Four. This was very fun. I say I liked them more, but I rated them the same. But this one had a slight edge.
5 stars doesn't allow for nuance.
I gave this one 3 stars, like the other 2 issues.
Same here.
But this is fantastic. You mentioned so this is the first appearance of Henry Pym, who is not yet Ant-Man, and Henry Pym, my guy, literally says, "But I have one advantage, a human brain, which has learned the art of judo," as he slides and lets the ant fall off the cliff, and that is the greatest thing I've ever read in the comic.
For the record, judo is another thing Stan Lee does not understand.
No, apparently not. For
the first 10 years, anytime someone does anything vaguely martial artsy, it's judo. And then eventually he learns the word jujitsu, and so it's always jujitsu. But either one of those just means something martial arts.
Yeah, motherfucker. Yeah, he swears to never he dumps out his formula and swears to not play around with that stuff again, and then goes on to break that like 3 issues later or whatever it is. So that's fantastic.
when those dirty, filthy communists attack, you gotta shrink.
Oh, excuse me. I think it's like 5 issues later, so I'll give him a little credit. Yeah, I don't. There's not a lot to say about this issue, really. It's just, if you haven't read the first appearance of Henry Pym here, it's actually a really good story.
I think it's still my favorite Henry Pym story.
That's my big joke.
There was a little mini series they did. I can't even remember what it was, but it was in one of the generically titled books, like Tales of Something or Other, where he went back to being Ant-Man. Way later, and it's like a 5-issue thing where he's just trying to cross a backyard. And it's way, way better than it sounds. And it's pretty much the only other Ant-Man story that comes close to being this good.
That's pretty much the joke about the character of Henry, who gets named Hank Pym 2 later, and he becomes Ant-Man, of course. Kind of the big joke about Ant-Man here. This honestly is one of the peaks of Ant-Man, and it's at the start, and it's before he's even Ant-Man. So
he's not even a superhero.
He's
at this
not
point,
even.
This is literally just one of those sci-fi science gone wrong stories that they shoved in the an anthology book, largely because someone drew a cool panel of an anthill, and they decided to run with it. Actually, I should look at who the creative team is.
And then the story was popular enough, they bring him back, and they came up with the Ant-Man gimmick for him, so that was cool.
Okay, this is Stan Lee and Jack Kirby again, although it has the bonus of being the first appearance of Larry Lieber in the 616 adjacent stuff. He snuck in because this was not originally intended to be part of the superhero universe. This was, like I said, just the science gone wrong story. And it's inked by Dick Ayers, who else does really good work on Jack Kirby's stuff.
Dick Ayers is really underappreciated in terms of people we look back on as comic fans.
And lettered by John D'Agostino.
And that's the only appearance it has is Henry Pym, so I guess we've touched on most of it.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, it's only a 6-page thing.
Yeah, it's not a big story. I did end up
Googling whether or not ants actually produce honey when he landed in the honey. And it turns out some of them do, just not ants that live in New York City.
Take that, Stanley. Another science fin you don't know.
I'm not making fun of that one. I didn't know it either.
That's fair. Good job, Stan. You almost
actually knew more about ants than I did, so I really can't mock him for getting the location of the honey ants wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You got one on us, buddy. There we go. I guess now it's Fantastic Four issue number 3 time, which is actually an important issue for no character reason, really. This is an important issue because we have the appearance of the Fantastic Four's costumes.
And the flying busted bathtub version of the Fantastic Car.
That's true. It's Fantastic Four's appearance as well. And the Fantastic Copter, apparently.
Yeah, it's in the cutaway of the headquarters.
Nobody gives a fuck about the Fantastic Copter, let's be honest.
Somewhere there's a single tear rolling down Stanley's cheek.
Somebody has a nerve or fist right now. I'm just trying to open up. I guess you can give a summary while I open this bad boy story up.
Alright, this one opens with the Fantastic Four at a magic show, hosted by a guy named the Miracle Man, who immediately calls them out in the audience, and starts talking about how he is way more powerful than them, and all this crazy stuff he can do. And he pisses off the Thing by making fun of him. So the Thing decides he's going to go murder him. At this point, the Thing's characterization is basically what the Hulk will become once they figure out what to do with a Hulk. in that he's just a big, strong guy that gets angry really easy. It takes them a while to find the characterization of Ben Grimm that we actually know in
He
modern days.
he might as well say Fiend Smash.
Pretty much, yeah. Um, and so the thing goes up on stage, and the wizard challenges him to a contest of strength, where he soundly defeats the thing and even absorbs a punch to the chin from him without flinching. And so they go home, and Reed's like, wow, it sure is lucky this guy isn't a criminal, because if he is, I'm pretty sure we couldn't do anything about it. And the next panel, we see the Miracle Man being like, wow, I've proved that I'm more powerful than the Fantastic Four. Now it's time for me to start my career of crime. And so he goes and he finds a movie theater where they have a giant, like, 50-foot model of the monster in the movie they're showing. And so he brings it to life and makes it his slave. And it goes around and steals a bunch of stuff for him. And the Fantastic Four see it on TV and decide that they have to go do something about it. So they go and find the monster. Oh, they go and while they're getting ready, the police find a note from the Miracle Man declaring war on the human race and stating his intention to conquer the earth. So they set off to find this monster. And they do. And Reed fights with it until he's defeated by his arch nemesis, a brick. Literally, the Miracle Man sees him like trying to hold back the monster and just hits him in the head with a brick. And at which point the mayor chews him out for being defeated by a brick. And the monster goes off to a military base somewhere not remotely near the city and tries to steal their new atomic tank. And he's walking off with it until Johnny finds him and sets him on fire. And he just burns up. And they're all like, well, what do we do with this? It was all just plaster and wood. And the Miracle Man has this hose that shoots chemical foam that he shoots Johnny with, so he crashes because his fire goes out. And then he sinks the thing into the ground. And he gets into the atomic tank and drives off. But Sue appears to be becoming useful and turns invisible and climbs into the back of the atomic tank to track where it's going, while the rest of the Fantastic Four go back to their headquarters to wait for a message from her telling them where to go. Naturally, since they have to be ready to leave at a moment's notice to go rescue Sue when she signals them, since she is obviously going to be in the heart of enemy territory, Johnny Storm decides to take his clothes off and take a bath. So they sit around, they think about how they became the Fantastic Four for the third time in 3 issues. And argue for a bit. And Johnny and Ben decide to kill each other, so they start fighting and destroying the headquarters. And the Miracle Man drives the atomic tank to a junkyard where he buries it in old cars, and Sue gets out to go sneak around and figure out where they are so that she can signal the other Fantastic Four, and immediately gets discovered. Literally the first panel, she gets found.
Sounds about right.
And the Miracle Man corners her and hypnotizes her into summoning the Fantastic Four anyway. So the Fantastic Four head over there and set out to rescue her. And the Miracle Man threatens them with a gun and tries to shoot Reed, but he decides to deal with it by forming himself into a giant rubber ball and bouncing around. I have no idea how he suddenly became bouncy. And then the Miracle Man shoots Ben a bunch until he runs out of ammo and runs for the atomic tank with Sue and takes off, and the rest of them go to chase it down, but he has sabotaged their helicopter. So they get into this old hot rod that they randomly found and go driving after it. And so the Miracle Man shoots out their tires. So Reed forms himself into a tire so that they can keep driving. And Johnny goes and flies in front of the tank and goes supernova and blinds the Miracle Man. So then somehow he's extracted from the tank and captured. All this is extraneous information that can take place completely off panel. We don't need to know how it happened.
It's not important.
And so they capture him and free Sue from the hypnotism. And then Reed reveals that he figured out that the Miracle Man didn't actually have any powers whatsoever and hypnotized everyone into believing all this stuff was happening. And when he was blinded, he lost his powers of hypnotism, and that's why everything worked out now. And if none of that makes sense, don't worry, you're in the same boat as anyone that read the comic.
Oh, this issue is something. This is the first comic in the order that I gave 2 stars.
Yeah, it was a definite 2, and I'm kind of feeling 1 having recapped it just now.
This
because
is...
it really makes no sense at all.
This story is so bad. It's good levels of bad, but it's like it's really bad. It's not good. This is by far the weakest story so far in the order, and I honestly, until Bill started the recap, I forgot that the Miracle Man was the villain of this piece, and the story is literally called The Menace of the Miracle Man, and I did not look at that. The biggest injustice of this issue is the fact that when Reed turned into a ball, there was no boing boing sound effect written in the panels. So.
The biggest injustice of this story is that when Reed turned into a ball and bounced around, the creative team of Strange Tales looked at that and went, that would make a good villain. And then they wrote the Bouncing Ball of Doom, which we will reach much later, and Ryan will hate me for having exposed him to
it. Going back to the Miracle Man a little bit, of course, this is his first appearance, and I forgot about him, I forgot him being the villain here. They also forgot about him in general, as his next appearance isn't until Fantastic Four issue number 138. So, if you're a Miracle Man fan, I'm sorry. He's not going to be around for a while. The creative team here, we of course have Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Saul Brodsky is the inker in this case. Saul Brodsky also joins Jack Kirby as a cover artist. Stan Goldberg back yet again, and they went back to Artie Simek here for the letter and for like they had for issue 1. So that's something. God, does the art. Is the art not good at times? The thing is drawn so badly at times. Just looking at the last page, there is a lot of bad art on the last page alone.
I feel like they were very rushed on this comic.
They probably were, because it feels like the art drops the quality here. We do get a nice little pinup though at this issue 2 of Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. It's a half decent pinup.
The fact that they felt like they could just put the capture of the villain off panel tells me that they were probably really rushed.
Great storytelling.
Because it's literally Johnny's going supernova in front of the tank, and the next panel he's holding his eyes, and they've just captured him. At this point, backgrounds weren't really a thing, so we don't even have any contrast in how he got there. It's just them standing around him on a gray background.
Yeah, and Yeah, the backgrounds is just a lot of color in a lot of cases. So, um, something I'm surprised we haven't talked about yet with these early issues of the Fantastic Four is that damn Fantastic Flare. we did not. We've barely touched on that. I find it's fantastic. It's great that they use a flare to to summon one another.
I mean, it does what it's supposed to, and it's just generic 60s comics bullshit, so I just kind of gloss it over as one of the wacky inventions that were everywhere in comics at this time.
Yeah, it's perfect for the time, but it definitely ages out of existence for sure.
But once you have cell phones, you don't need to really shoot up into the air.
Exactly. I don't know if there's much more to say about this. I mean, they debuted their costumes, so that's nice. The costumes are a great addition. That's about the best part of this issue.
They gave the Thing a shirt, and every single time he decides to fight, he rips it off, and then as soon as the fight's over, he's just wearing it again. But I managed to fit most of my nitpicks into my summaries, so... Like Johnny deciding to go take a bath while his sister's life was in danger.
As you do. Johnny Storm is somehow, in these early issues of Fantastic Four and just these comics in general, Johnny Storm is somehow the nicest guy on the team, yet somehow also he is not only the most problematic character, but he's the nicest guy, but he's like, in a way, I don't want to say he's the biggest dick, but like, hell, he's
the most annoying.
He's the most annoying.
But part of that is because they don't seem to have figured out how old he is.
Yeah, he's a teenager.
He'll bounce between looking to be about 25 and looking to be about 12, depending on the panel you're looking at. And in these early stories, he'll do different things that make no sense in relation to each other. And only thing I can assume is because they don't know how old he is yet. Because he'll be in school, like high school, or sometimes it even almost looks like he's in junior high and he's going to the soda shop with his friends. And other times he's enough of an adult to be included on the team that is trying to fly into space to study stuff. And yes, they stole the rocket because they weren't authorized to go up yet. But none of that was because they were taking a 14-year-old with them. It was just that they thought maybe they should run some more tests before they launched themselves into space.
Yeah, Johnny Storm is an undisclosed age teenager in these early stories, and he could be anywhere as young as 12, essentially, from I think even one issue, like, they kind of hint towards that he is kind of between, like, 12, 14. He could be, like, 12, 15. Friggin', he could be an older teenager.
I think it's this one, because he literally, when he gets mad that Ben got into a fight with him, he goes to the malt shop with his friends, and he's sitting around with a bunch of people that are drawn like the children characters in the 50s comics. Like, they're not using teenager models. They're using models of the sort that you would see in, like, the students in Meet Miss Bliss who works in an elementary school.
We get a little more context to Johnny's age when him and Spidey kind of become friends, because they're really supposed to be, like, the same age or around the same age. Like, Johnny Storm might be, like, a year older than Peter or something.
Yeah, the one good thing that comes out of Johnny's solo book, Strange Tales, which we'll get to.
There's a good thing that comes out of that.
Is the fact that that's when they finally lock down his age, because in that one he is explicitly in the last year of high school.
Yeah, they almost quickly age him, because it seemed like he was supposed to be younger at first, but they don't want him to be too young at the same time, so they kind of age him right to the end of high school.
Yeah, at this point, I think he's intended to be the series Robin.
Yeah. Or we know the legends of Stan wanted to write teenagers, but they wouldn't let him. So it seems like it's kind of this is probably another case of that. Quickly, Stan wanted to write a younger character, but they probably were like, he should be a little older.
And I'll be honest, I think they were right, because having read 1940s era Cap, there's always something distinctly disturbing about a full-sized adult punching Bucky in the face as hard as they can. Or, like, shooting at him, because he's 8.
Anyways, I think it's time for Fantastic Four #4. Do you agree?
Yeah, I've got nothing else.
Okay, here we go then. This is probably the issue you're most excited to talk about. I'm guessing.
No, I like
Um,
Man in the Anthill more, even though I rated this one higher. But that one it got a boost on historical importance.
yeah. Well, I don't really have. Yeah, I'll let you jump right into the summary and then we'll comment. So.
All right, so this is Fantastic Four #4, The Coming of Submariner. They like the not at the time euphemistic title a lot because basically every time they introduce a new character, it's The Coming of X or the gentleman's name is X. You'll see that a lot as we go forward. Anyway, this is written by Stan Lee, artist Jack Kirby, inked by Sol Brodsky, and lettered by Artie Simic, colored by Stan Goldberg, if you can find an original colored issue. And this one picks up right where we left off in the last one. 3 members of the Fantastic Four are sitting around their headquarters trying to figure out what happened to Johnny Storm because he got into a big sook after the last adventure because as far as he's concerned, he did all the work and everyone wasn't super grateful for him. And so he's taken off and quit the team. And so they set off to investigate where he could be, which Sue does by turning invisible and going to the soda shop and stealing some guy's soda and drinking it. Well, he just runs off because the place is haunted. And Reed sees a random guy on a motorcycle and figures, Johnny likes stuff with engines. This guy will know where he is. So he reaches out and grabs the guy off the motorcycle while it's traveling at like 100 miles an hour. And starts questioning him until he notices kids playing baseball and figures, they're kids, they'll know where he is, and leaves because Reed is the dumbest smart guy in this book. And we find out Johnny is actually with a bunch of mechanics building a car. And he needs to weld, so he uses his flame powers. And then flames up completely just because he can, and because people reading this book might not know what his powers are yet. That's actually the reason why they repeat stuff so much in these early issues. They're assuming people haven't read the previous ones.
Oh, yeah.
And Ben just happens to be in the area and notices the fire and decides that the ultimate solution to Johnny quitting the team is murder. And so he busts into the garage where Johnny's working, picks up the car Johnny has been building and flings it at him and starts trying to kill him when he randomly turns back into Ben Grimm, which makes him so happy that Johnny can fly away. And then turns back into the Thing again.
He doesn't even get a full page being a human again.
I don't know why they were doing this. They eventually just drop it. I don't think it ever goes anywhere. And so Johnny goes to some tenement filled with old homeless people and decides he's going to live there because he has no friends since he quit the team. And I guess all his other friends are now mad at him because a giant orange rock monster came in and smashed their garage. So he's sitting in the tenement reading Submariner comics. And all the bums are making fun of him because there's another guy in the, I want to say homeless shelter, but those weren't really a thing back then. So I think it's just like a boarding house where they're all in the same room for reasons.
It says men's hotel on the outside in a panel there, so it's supposed to be some kind of hotel, but it's kind of weird how it's laid out. So.
Yeah, it's set up like they're thinking of a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they go and start antagonizing the old bearded guy that's supposedly as strong as the Submariner. And he just wants to be left alone. And so he beats them all up. And so they and says that he's got amnesia. He doesn't know who he is. So they figured that the solution to this is to grab boards and bottles and beat his memory back into him. And Johnny has a better idea for how he's going to figure out who this guy is. He's just going to burn his beard off. So he lights himself on fire and burns the guy's beard and long hair off. And what a surprise! It's actually the Submariner. And so we cut back to the other members of the Fantastic Four, still trying to find Johnny, and Reed's increasingly ineffective methods of doing that, such as stretching up to a helicopter and asking them if they've seen him, and stretching up to a train from a different city and asking them if they've seen it. And strangely, none of these people have heard of the Fantastic Four or think they're real. While Sue walks through the bad part of town, and she's in front of the men's hotel, when Johnny comes, with her back to it, when Johnny comes down the stairs with the Submariner and walks right past her while talking, and she somehow does not notice her own brother. But Johnny takes Submariner and flies out to sea and throws him in the ocean. And Namor gets his memory back because water cures everything, and heads off for his home and discovers that his undersea city, I don't believe this is Atlantis, this is probably still the city they had under Antarctica, although they're never entirely clear on where it is.
My undersea kingdom, I must return.
Yeah, that's why I think it's the one under Antarctica. But he discovers that it's been completely destroyed, and it's highly radioactive, and so he concludes that the humans did it with their atomic tests, and therefore he must kill every single human. So he comes all the way back to New York City before Johnny has even managed to leave, and declares that he is taking revenge on Earth by killing everyone. And so Johnny, in a moment of more intelligence than he shows in early episodes, decides he can't deal with this alone, and summons the rest of the Fantastic Four to come and help him. And so they show up, and everyone's happy and reunite. Johnny catches them up on what's going on. Well, Namor swims off and wakes up a giant whale with legs and arms named Giganto that he's going to use to destroy the city. And so it comes back and starts walking through the city and smashing stuff, and more stuff gets smashed by the fact that they're firing artillery at it. And the Fantastic Four try to fight with it, but don't have much luck. But it manages to somehow fall over. They don't really show like its legs are blocked by the building, but it just all of a sudden falls over. And so Ben goes and gets a giant atomic bomb and straps it to his back. And like it's so big that when they're mounting it, they have a soldier behind him with a jack that's like as big as he is, jacking up the back end of this bomb so they can tie it to Ben. And Ben walks off and walks into the mouth of Giganto, who's still down. And they have some actually fantastic panels of him walking deeper and deeper into this thing's gut. And he goes inside and gets attacked by some other weird monsters that live inside it. But he drops the bomb and sets the timer on it and takes off running. And it blows up just as he gets out of it. And we're now informed that Giganto is dead, although he appears to be in exactly the same position as he was before. And Namor's like, well, you may have defeated Giganto, but I still have this horn, so I'm still unbeatable. And Susan just walks up invisible and yoinks the horn out of his hands and runs away with it. And he's just like, oh, damn it. But he runs after her and tackles her because while she's invisible, the Horn is not, so he knows where she is. And being stunned, she turns visible, and Namor immediately falls in love and decides that he's going to kidnap her and make her his queen, whether she wants to or not. Early Namor is very rapey.
Ah, my one weakness, pretty blondes.
And the rest of the Fantastic Four try to attack him, but he easily defeats them in a panel. And Johnny gets an idea and lights on fire and makes a giant and flies around in circles super fast, making a giant vortex that sucks up Namor and the corpse of Giganto and dumps them way back in the ocean. And they figure that he's gone and nothing bad will come of him being back in the ocean, which gives him power. And so they're just like, well, guess we're going home. And it ends.
Yeah, I don't regret giving this story 2 stars.
Nor do I regret giving it 4.
Yeah, this is the first story that Bill and I have wildly different views on. And I think I discovered why the main reason I don't like this issue is because every goddamn character's a dick here. Reed and Ben can turn into complete dicks while searching for Johnny. Johnny has a couple smart moves, but Johnny Storm is like my foil in this read through so far.
Oh, Johnny Storm is awful.
Johnny Storm sucks. There might be an episode called that, honestly, but probably when we start Strange Tales. But
well,
like,
they'll bury the lead.
Johnny did dump Namor into the sea on purpose. I have to throw out there. He wanted to bring his memory back.
Yeah, the first time he dumped him both times he did it on purpose. The first time was to bring his memory back, and the second time was because they were running out of panels, and it was the best way they could figure out to end things.
I love how when Namor defeats the Fantastic Four in the one panel, he literally just throws his arms up in the air in uppercut form, and that somehow takes all 3 of them out, so that's fantastic.
Yeah, at this point, they hadn't really gotten into laying out the fights yet. Like, they're just kind of, you assume they happened.
Yeah.
And they'll just show, like, one panel of the end of the fight. That's part of why these stories are so dense with stuff happening in them. Because, I mean, anything modern age, this would be like a 6-part miniseries.
Yeah. This issue gives us a pinup of Mr. Fantastic, go Reed Richards himself. And this is the first comic that has the lead up to Hulk in it. On the bottom and tops of pages throughout the issue, we get things like, the Hulk is coming. Who is the Hulk? You've never seen anything like the Hulk. So they're trying to promote the fuck out of the Hulk and make him a big deal before his debut.
Month that the Hulk released.
So
it's a little later in the read through because there was some other stuff that came out this month that ended up getting wedged in later. But I believe Hulk released this month.
They're preparing Hulk. They're trying to make Hulk a big deal. He's about to debut, which is great and terrible all at once, which we'll talk about next episode. What else? I guess obviously this wasn't Namor's first appearance. Namor the Submariner was a hero of the Golden Age. This was his return in his Silver Age debut. Yeah. So that's cool.
It can effectively go as the first appearance because the only character that had any sort of character development in the Golden Age was Captain America, and most of that got retconned out of existence when they decided that he was actually 3 different Captain Americas. And by character development, I mean became a teacher once World War II was over.
I guess another thing in terms of the differences between our ratings, we in our personal conversations, I think we've discovered that that Bill's a bigger fan of Namor at this point than I am for sure. So this is actually my favorite appearance. No, actually that's a lie. The next appearance of Namor is my favorite appearance that I've read so far, and kind of each appearance since that has kind of gone down and down in terms of my enjoyment of the character. So we'll kind of see how that goes as time
Yeah,
moves on.
they did overuse him early on. And that's a common theme with early Marvel, that they come up with a good villain and they use them way too much.
Loki.
I was thinking of Magneto, but yes, Loki too.
Loki gets overused at the start of Journey into Mystery, which will Thor's
Better
run
when
on
they're
Journey.
overusing Cobra
We'll
and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Sometimes it's good that they reuse the villains, and sometimes they just reuse them and use them wrong. But yeah, Fantastic Four #4. I think we've pretty much talked about everything we need to, unless you have something else.
Just check real quick if I had anything else I wanted to mention. This comic is the first instance of completely bullshit uses of fire.
Yes, it is. I did not point out any of that.
Namely, when Johnny decides to shave Namor by lighting himself on fire and hoping Namor's hair doesn't catch on fire.
That's the greatest panel.
I'd argue the greatest panel is Thing with the nuclear bomb being jacked up on his back.
That is fantastic as well. I guess you reminded me of something when you said this is the first occurrence. This is the first occurrence of a Golden Age hero being brought back in the Silver Age, which I kind of talked on, but I didn't really make that as big of a deal as it should be. Namor comes back before Captain America does any of the other heroes from the Golden Age to come back, so this is a pretty big deal.
Even though the other of the big three in the Golden Age was the Human Torch, it's a different Human Torch.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
the Human Torch...
The idea was reused, but the original Human Torch doesn't show up for another 4 or 5 years, I think. I think it's the 5th annual that he finally shows up.
Yeah, so different Human Torch. But it's same concept, different guy. So technically, Namor still fits as the full first character back.
Yeah.
Anything else from you? Bill's the professional one here with notes. I didn't do any notes here.
I managed to work basically everything I had into
the summary. Perfect.
Because most of it was just like the really good art when Thing was inside Giganto, and how hilarious his plan of, I'm just going to strap a nuke on my back and walk into the monster and hopefully nothing goes wrong with this.
I guess we can kind of joke for a second about inflation was hitting hard here in this time period, and in between Tales to Astonish 27 and Fantastic Four issue #3, inflation hit and comics went up by 2 cents, so that's something.
Yeah.
They went from 10 cents to 12 cents.
Depending on which market you were in, because Fantastic Four 3 is actually the first variant covers in Marvel's history.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't mention it because they're not really variants in the sense we think of them nowadays, but in certain markets they were testing the price of 12 cents to see if people would pay it. So there's actually versions of the cover with the price in 10 cents and versions with the price is 12 cents.
Well, there we go. So that was their first issue testing the waters of price increases.
Yeah,
so
it was only like 2 markets they did it in, but they do exist with the other price.
All right. That's actually a cool fun fact. I guess we're moving on to Tales to Astonish 29 then. The good old When Space Beasts Attack story.
Which I have not forgiven Frank Castle for.
This is a 6-page story. I literally do not remember this story at all, so Bill definitely has to tackle this one.
Alright. Well, this is When Space Beasts Attack by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, inked by Dick Ayers, and we don't know who the colorist or letterer are. They don't start actually writing the credits in the pages for another few issues, so it's just what people have been able to track down on the internet. But basically, what happens in this story And first of all, when Ryan says it's a 6-page story, it's a 5-page story because the first page is a splash panel with no text at all in it. But we see a group of aliens led by a guy named Luther Gore, which you don't need to know because he never shows up again.
This is Luther Gore's only appearance, yes.
Yeah, and they're planning on conquering other alien races. And then we see some farmers sitting on a porch, and there's such farmers that the main guy's name is Jeb. And he's talking about how mankind will survive anything, and no matter what happens, it always works out all right in the end. And then an armada of flying cats. God damn it, I saw a person in the panel saying suffering cats and got it in my brain. An armada of flying saucers flies over and ignores where he lives because it's Kansas, and even aliens don't go to Kansas. But instead flies to New York City, where the army decides to shoot them down, but are repelled by the powers of magnetism, which is a notable first appearance of magnets don't work like this, Stan. And then the aliens climb down the ladders from their spaceships and set about vaporizing tanks and airplanes and hangars. And notably, when they vaporize the tanks and the airplanes, they vaporize the people inside the tanks later as well. This is important for how stupid the ending is. And then they sit around to cow the population by vaporizing various statues and cars and bridges and stuff. And so the people all surrender and are enslaved and are building some sort of giant temple for the aliens that have conquered the entire planet. And they decide that maybe we should actually go and, occupy the rest of the space. So they go out to Kansas, and they show up at Jeb's farm, and they threaten him and tell him that he's going to work for them now. And he refuses and hits one of the aliens with his gun and knocks it out cold. And so the aliens try to vaporize him, and he's completely unharmed, except his belt buckle disappears. So they realize that, wait a minute, the vaporization rays only work on metal. And so Jeb takes his metal gun that he was holding when he was shot with the ray gun that vaporizes everything made out of metal and shoots the aliens, and they run away. And all the humans realize that the aliens aren't actually that dangerous because they can only vaporize metal, and proceed to also use metal guns to shoot the aliens until they flee the planet. And Jeb's like, see, I told you everything works out in the end. And the story's over until those stupid aliens show up in a Punisher in 2012.
Yeah. This story sucks 1 star.
Yes. I'm so mad about the fact that they were blatantly vaporizing stuff that we saw being driven around by humans, and the humans would disappear with it, and then they're like, it doesn't work on people.
This is our first case of 1 star ratings in the story, and it won't be long to wait till the next one. Like we said earlier, first and only appearance of Luther Gore, first and only appearance of Jeb Harris as well. So he's not
only
made for
important
this
appearance
world.
is the space beasts, which apparently get reused. And like I said, I'm very angry at Frank Castle for making me read this.
They get reused in the 2009 volume of The Punisher. They appear in issue number 12 of that, so we'll reach that in about 10 years, so just stay tuned. There's really not much to say about this issue. It's a inconsequential read. Yeah, it's very unimportant.
It's one of the stupid sci-fi stories that later an author decided to call back to, so it got lumped in just because it came after Fantastic Four #1, so we arbitrarily declared that everything after that point is part of modern 616 and everything before it isn't.
Yeah. On the on the topic of inconsequential stories, I guess it's time to move on to our last story of this first episode of Route 616, and that is Tales to Astonish, issue number 30, the E-story, titled Coag.
Yes.
And this is the first appearance of Coag, who doesn't appear until... Wow. He doesn't appear until Monsters Unleashed in 2017, issue number 3. And that's how I know that character's name before, because I've read that title. That's incredible. That was the event version of the title. Wow. This is done. Stan Lee wrote this, and I guess this is our first appearance of Steve Ditko on the
yes,
order.
So that is the one important element of this book. It's our first Steve Ditko.
Which is a lovely...
Which is why the art is relatively good in this compared to anything else about this story whatsoever.
We are both big Steve Ditko fans, as we kind of touched on earlier. Saul Brodsky did join Jack Kirby to do the cover, though, which is probably why the interiors are so much better than the cover is.
And the cover also does not mention Coag. It's just better stories.
Yeah, Return of the Gorilla Man and Finn from the Hidden Swamp. So
I actually like the Gorilla Man.
They weren't pushing Coag here too well.
No, we have 5 pages left in the book. What do we do?
Literally, it's a 5-page story. Well, here we go. I'm gonna attempt to take the summary of this one because I just love this story. Our scene is in an outpost in Africa, so there we go. Who is the main character? They don't even say.
Yeah, he doesn't have a name.
He doesn't even have a name. He's just the racist that's going along here. He's escaping from a guy. Some native police are trying to grab him, as he says. He says if he can make it to the jungle, he'll be safe, which he does manage. He's asked to surrender, but he doesn't. You'll never get me, so he says. He falls down a crumbling ledge, falls into some water past a tree branch here. He survives his fall, thank God. He has made it onto... None can escape justice. He has made it onto an island. He hears some jungle drums. He says how he must be near a village here. He's told by a native "Begone, intruder! This land is taboo. In this valley dwells Coag. Coag." The native goes on to say that none may pass the walls, for the great Coag dwells within. Nobody makes it out that goes in. So this guy, of course, decides to go in because he doesn't believe any of that shit. So he jumps over the big fence, I guess after climbing up a tree, we're led to assume. He gets inside and he finds this hut just in the middle of the village here, and it's surrounded by tall grass and everything. The guy makes it inside the hut and then makes a wall of a tall grass with some spears coming out of it. He talks about his plan. He talks about how the natives believe in some sort of demon, and he talks about his plan to kill a native or two and pretend that he's Coag because he doesn't believe that Coag exists. And he talks about his plan to build this barricade to keep any animals out. So he's safe from anything man or beast. He says, "Yes, sir, tomorrow I'll make myself some kind of nutty costume, and then I'll be Coag. Ha, I'll ask for gold, jewels, ivory, and I'll kill someone every few weeks to show I'm not kidding." So he's just planning to become a serial killer of the natives around. Coag, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, he hears a noise, and... Whoa, what? He's trapped himself in here because he made the surrounding tall grass with the spears poking out, and he is trapped because there is indeed a Coag. And he says, "No, it can't be. I never dreamt. How could I have known? The Koag was here all the time." The hut that was in the middle of the village here was actually Koag, the monster Koag. And this guy who's a little bit racist is dead. So that's our story. 1 star.
Yes, and it's so good, Stan decides to use the entire thing again in like 5 years.
Yeah, the story, I have not gotten to that part yet, but the story is apparently retold as Abel has told me.
Yes, he does a story called The Forbidden Planet, which is beat by beat the exact same story except in space instead of in Africa.
So fantastic stuff here. I'm really glad we ended on a high note with this first episode.
Better than starting it. People would turn it on and be like, "What the hell is this shit?"
Yeah.
Turn it back off.
I picked this one to end on because I'd rather end on not the. I mean, this one's kind of fun to poke fun at least, but this is better to end on than to start on for sure. And now that we've ended, on this comic, on this story, next episode we get to start with the Incredible Hulk issue number 1. I guess I should. I will tease what's to come in the next episode, because if you enjoyed, we want you to come back here. So we have Incredible Hulk issue 1, and then we will be tackling the second issue as well. We have, what else do we have here? I guess I'll just start clicking here. So we have Incredible Hulk issue number 1, then we have the D story of Tales to Astonish issue number 32. We have Incredible Hulk issue number 2, like I mentioned. We will be tackling the Man in the Sky story from the B story from Amazing Adult Fantasy number 14. Fantastic Four issue 5 comes into play, which is a huge issue, and if you don't know why, stay tuned. And we will then end the issue on the one and only Amazing Fantasy number 15. Yes, the first appearance of Spider-Man. So we have some exciting stuff in store for for episode number 2. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say we are excited to come back and talk about those comics.
Well, the second half, the first ones can kind of die in a fire. I did not enjoy that 6-issue run of Hulk, for the record.
We have a lot to say about the Hulk in the next episode. Is certainly where we will leave that. We don't want to go into ranting about Hulk yet and spoil the fun in the next episode. So we have a couple short 5-page stories again in the next episode. There'll be some of those for a while, but then Fantastic Four issue number 5 is a big deal. I'm not going to spoil why this time. We'll spoil that probably pretty early in the next episode. And then, of course, Amazing Fantasy 15, I'm going to tell you it's the first appearance of Spider-Man, because you already know probably if you hear the name Amazing Fantasy 15. So yeah,
it's one of those ones, if you're remotely into comics, you probably know the name.
Exactly. We are really ending on a high note at the end of the next episode, because we have FF5 and Amazing Fantasy 15 in a row. So those will be very exciting to talk about.
Yeah, and the other good thing is it's basically the last appearance of the bullshit 5-page stories that don't matter.
Yeah, they don't stick around too long.
There's one more that turns up. Oh god, what is it even in? I think it's the first in the book with the first appearance of Iron Man's A Journey into Suspense, or Tales of Suspense. It tells one, and then I don't believe there's any more. And other than that, when we get 5-pagers, they're
there's the Merlin one.
Oh, okay, right. Oh well, there's not many, but other than that, it's like stuff that actually relates to characters that we care about. Like, I know they do a big run of 5-page stories with Tales of Asgard, which is fantastic, and that's all Thor stuff. And then they dabble in reprinting some of those old 50s throwaway tales, but they give a framing device of either the Wasp or the Watcher telling the story. But they make more of an effort to integrate it into the actual universe so it feels less pointless.
Yeah, and while this first episode of the podcast is very Fantastic Four heavy, we will more and more quickly and more quickly. There will be more variety that comes up in our order, so it won't be all mostly about one team of heroes, which is nice. I like variety personally.
Yeah. For the next run of the podcast, we should be getting decent variety. We don't really start clumping up until they do a big run of Doctor Strange, is I think the next time we'll start clumping up.
Yeah, probably.
And that's coming to the end of Ditko's time with Marvel, so that's not for a while.
Yeah, which is good because we'll enjoy the Ditko era while we're in it. Next episode, stay tuned for the next episode as well, as we have the debut of our third podcast member. So that's gonna be fun too. So stick around for that. We have another guy on this fucking thing, so that's gonna be fun. Other than that, I guess we are done for this very first episode of Route 616. I hope there's some people listening to this. Our hypothetical audience, I hope you enjoyed this very first episode. I think I speak for both Bill and I when we can say we enjoyed this, and we've been wanting to do a podcast on this for a while, so pretty fun stuff. Anything else you want to say, Bill, before we end up here?
Just pretty much thanks for listening, and hopefully we have some people back for episode 2.
Amen. So, hope you all enjoyed listening to this. I'm not going to promote what platforms this is on yet until I actually get this uploaded and know. So next episode, there'll be a bit of format changes probably, and I'll be promoting what platforms this is actually on. My plan is to get this on YouTube and get this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, some other things. So we'll see how that goes. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. We will see you all in the next one, and we will also, like I said, be debuting our guest on the podcast, and we will see you all later, and peace out. Bye.
Have a good one.